Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today we're going to be talking about optimal thyroid levels. What do they look like? We're going to chat about that. Before we do, please put your comments down below. Let me know about your most recent thyroid test and or questions on the thyroid. Before you do, make sure you smash that like button. Hit the bell so you get notifications of great content coming your way. Really appreciate it. So what are your optimal thyroid levels? So the first thing we look at in a thyroid test is TSH. That stands for Thyroid Stimulating Hormone. That's made by the pituitary. So you have the hypothalamus pituitary, and TSH is a stimulating hormone. We have TRH, actually made by the hypothalamus above. That's thyroid releasing hormone, right? That goes to the pituitary, that triggers TSH, and then TSH goes to the thyroid, and it triggers the thyroid to make T4. It takes 4 molecules of iodine, right? Because T4 stands for tetraiodothyronine, so you have 4 molecules of iodine, and then you have a thyroglobulin, which is made up of tyrosine in there, and they're bound together. And then the enzyme that cleaves off those iodines to activate the thyroid hormone from T4 to T3, which is 300 to 400% more metabolically active, that enzyme is a deiodinase enzyme, which is selenium dependent. And selenium is really important for activating thyroid hormone. So first up is TSH. That's a brain hormone, and we want ideally 0.5 to 2.5 is a pretty good range for that. If we have too much stress, too much cortisol, too much inflammation, poor sleep, poor diet, that can definitely dysregulate, because we can have hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis issues. That feedback loop can get dysregulated. We can see it with the ovaries, the gonads, the gut, the adrenals especially with that natural cortisol rhythm. We can see that skew significantly. So 0.5 to 2.5, that can dysregulate. Of course, if it goes too high, that's your classic hypothyroid kind of primary pituitary hypothyroid pattern, where the TSH is having to raise the volume to be able to communicate with the thyroid to make T4. And so typically once you go above 4.5, that's where conventional diagnosis catches you, sometimes 5.5, right? The old kind of joke in, with my colleagues was, hey, if you want to cure someone of thyroid issues, you just fly them from the East Coast, where the range for LabCorp is 5.5, to the West Coast, where it's 4.5. I'm sorry, you go from West Coast, where it's 4.5, to 5.5 on the East Coast, right? Because it's just a big lab change just with flying a couple hours in a plane. Obviously, it doesn't fix anything. The lab cutoff that we're using, we want to be below 3 on a TSH. So we're using a pretty good functional range on that one. So TSH 0.5, 2.5, ideally 1. T4 levels, T4 free around 1 to 1.5. That's your T4 free, and then your T4 total 6 to 10 is fine. That's your more inactive thyroid hormone, right? T4 is 300 to 400% more inactive than T3. It still has some metabolic effect, and it does feed back to the TSH. If there's enough, it does suppress TSH. As T4 goes up, it'll start to signal, hey, TSH, we're good, and it will knock it down. So conventional doctors, they typically give Synthroid, which is T4, and that will trigger TSH and will bring it down. So if your TSH is elevated, it will bring it back down. And again, high levels of TSH not good for the thyroid, because it's overstimulating the thyroid. You could potentially get a goiter from it, a swollen thyroid. And then, of course, most doctors get concerned with, you need thyroid hormone for bone health and a lot of other things with your metabolism. So most doctors are only worried about TSH from the perspective that it typically means thyroid hormone is low. Now, they don't usually test it. So when we look at TSH, we're also testing T4 free, maybe T4 total, T3 free, T3 total. We'll look at the antibodies too. We're not going to make an assumption on thyroid hormone levels just by looking at TSH like most conventional medical doctors or endocrinologists do. I mean, you're lucky to get a TSH and a T4 free out of your conventional medical doctor. You're lucky with the T4. So T4 free in total, T4 free 1 to 1.5, T4 total 6 to 10. Next is going to be T3 free and T3 total. So T4 gets converted to T3, right? We talked about the deiodinase enzyme and selenium and how important that is. Selenium is also very important for converting hydrogen peroxide, which can occur when iodine is forming and making thyroid hormone. Selenium is very important for taking hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2, and converting it into H2O, which we know is water. And that's a very benign substance, but hydrogen peroxide could be more inflammatory for the thyroid and exacerbate an autoimmune attack. So we got to be careful with that. Also, too much iodine during an autoimmune antibody environment can actually potentially increase it too. It potentially can. There's a lot of things in the data that high levels of iodine can exacerbate Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition involving TPO and thyroglobulin antibodies. So T4 free in total, we talked about it. T3 free, 3 and up. 3 to 4 is pretty good, right? The range is typically 2 to 2.2 on the low side to 4 to 4.2 on the high side. So T3 free above 3 is good. And then T3 total, above 100 is usually good. I tend to just bias my testing looking at the free hormone because that's the most important. And usually that gives you a pretty good enough of a window into everything else. And then T3 total, 100 or up. I think that range is like 71 on the low side to like 150-ish on the high side. So I like 100 or up is pretty good. And then reverse T3 under 20, T3 uptake, which is typically if you have good T3 levels, you're going to have good T3 uptake. So it's usually not that big of a deal. If you have a lot of thyrobinding globulin because of high amounts of estrogen, that could definitely affect T3 uptake though as well. So overly low T3 uptake could mean a lot of estrogen. So if we see women on birth control pills, we may run a thyrobinding globulin. A lot of times with thyroid cancer patients, they'll also look at it as well, make sure it's not too high for them. Reverse T3, we want it below 20. And then our thyroid antibodies, we want TPO under 20, 15 or less. Thyroglobulin, we want it, thyroglobulin antibody, we want that about, under 1. Or I think it's 0.9 or less for Quest Lab is the cutoff. So hope that gives you a pretty good idea of what I'm looking for in thyroid levels. And again, I know these numbers because I deal with them all day long, right? This is all I do. And having researched the book and done all this stuff, I got all these numbers right on the tip of my tongue. Now, when you have a thyroid issue, though, there can be an overlap and you could have potentially an adrenal issue that you feel is a thyroid issue because of the energy and mood and cognitive issues that go along with low thyroid function. Usually thyroid, you see more hair loss. You may see eyebrow thinning. You may see a lot of constipation, but that can overlap with SIBO. You could also potentially have poor digestion and not break down your proteins and fat, and that could also be contributing to hair issues. So you got to look at everything. A lot of people, they set themselves up for failure because they go into it like, hey, I think it's this, and they go all in and they kind of bias themselves on what they think the issue is and what they look at, and so they may miss all this out here. So when I look at a patient, we'll look at thyroid if we see those symptoms. We'll look at anemia too. Low iron in women is super common, especially with digestive issues and excessive menstruation/hemorrhagia. We may see that. We got to look at the adrenals. We got to look at the gut because all the nutrients to run these metabolic pathways have to get absorbed somewhere. And if we have very poor absorption, we're not breaking down our minerals, we're not breaking down our fats and proteins, we may have some bottlenecks in all these nutrients getting assimilated and utilized in the body metabolically. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it gives you some good actionable information on what to look at. I'll put a link down below if you actually want to get these tests ordered yourself. You can do it through me. A lot of conventional docs won't do it. We'll put a link down below, so if you want to order it, you can, and you can get access to those labs. That's totally cool. And if you want to reach out to someone like myself or my colleagues, we're available down below. You can schedule a consult chat with us worldwide, which is great, and we can kind of dive in and look at what else could be under the roof, under the hood, so to speak, and get to the root cause of what else is going on with your health issues. So I hope you enjoyed today's chat. We will move to some live questions now. All right, let me jump on Facebook real quick. Can you talk about the vitamin D connection with thyroid? So vitamin D has a major role in immune balance. So if you have a lot of Hashimoto's type of symptomology, you have elevations in antibodies, low vitamin D can affect your immune system. So vitamin D, adequate vitamin D, 50 to 70, or maybe 70 to 100 if you're autoimmune, you would probably want, that's going to help your T regulatory cells. And T regulatory cells, they kind of put the finger on the scale. If this is your seesaw and this is Th1, Th2 immune balance, most Hashimoto's patients are Th1 dominant. And vitamin D kind of comes in there and puts your finger on the seesaw, and it kind of just puts it down a little bit. It kind of modulates. It has a immune balancing effect. So T regulatory cells have an influence on modulating the immune system. So vitamin D and glutathione both as well. And guess what? Selenium, which is very important for Hashimoto's, guess what? It does actually provide a precursor for glutathione production as well. Excellent questions there. Good, and I take 5,000 to 10,000 IUs a day, and I still can't get enough over 36 vitamin D. So you may want to look at, Joan, getting an emulsified liquid vitamin D, and I'd probably go up to 20,000 IUs of vitamin D for a month, but then retest so I don't let it go too long and have it go too high. Great question, though. All right, let me keep on rolling, guys. My doctor actually recommended thyroid test when I went for my hair loss. So yeah, hair loss, like I mentioned, could be a thyroid issue, but why is your thyroid dysfunctioning? Is it because of a gut issue, an adrenal issue? Is it just a pure autoimmune issue, which could be connected to gut and gluten and all that, right? So everything functions and dysfunctions together. It's very rare that something by itself just like spontaneously combusts, right? You have to look at the big picture. Hello, sir. I'm doing wormwood and 7 HCl tablets, hoping to fix my gut. Okay, good luck. I mean, wormwood's a good antibacterial. I have that on my GI Clear 1. I like it. Hopefully, you're getting your gut assessed so you know exactly what you're going after. After having apple cider vinegar, I get bloated. What can this mean? So if you're having apple cider vinegar and you're getting bloated, it just depends. What are you eating? Is this happening by itself with ACV? I would test out lemon juice, and I would test out maybe an HCl capsule. Typically, more acidity will help, but it could just be an issue with the apple cider vinegar, maybe some of the fermentation. If you're doing a Bragg's, it could be something like that. So you want to test it with other types of acid products. Is thyroid testing one of the first tests you run on your patients? Also, how accurate are these, the Voldemort testing? Yeah, okay. So the Rona testing, if we will. The PCR testing, I don't think is going to be the most, I don't think it's that accurate because of the false positive at 50% plus on that. And I mean, even the founder of that test for a virus, it's going to be much, remember, a virus is so small, you have to basically, there's an enzyme they use to kind of grow it so they can actually test it, right? So PCR is better with parasites and bacteria because of the fact that these things are much bigger. Viruses are like 0.1 microns, right? Like really, really small. That some of that has a higher amount of false positive rate. So that's a concern on that. And then regarding thyroid testing with patients, it's not the first test unless I see strong clinical presentation that thyroid's an issue. Cold hands, cold feet, hair loss. Typically, I always jump on female or male and or adrenal hormones first, and I may run the thyroid side by side if we have a strong clinical presentation. If it's not super strong, I typically will go after those markers first, see what comes back, treat, see how they do, and if we're not moving in the right direction, then we'll add in a thyroid test down the road, and maybe even an iron test if they're a cycling female. We'll go and look deeper there. Could fasting be dangerous for someone with an unknown thyroid condition? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Remember, when your metabolism is lower, most of the time it's autoimmune. And if your metabolism is lower, your body's trying to conserve energy, right? It's trying to say, hey, let's lower our metabolic rate. And by you screwing with that energy coming into the body, meaning imagine like you need money to go pay your bills and your boss is like, hey, we're going to do a fast on your paycheck this week. I'm not going to pay you till Friday, but you were expecting that check on Monday, right? It's like, wait, your body's kind of counting on it, or say your bank account is accounting on that money, right? Well, your body's counting on those nutrients. Now, when you get healthier and you have some like health income invested in the bank, right? Or in the market or in some real estate, you can draw on that, right? So when the healthier you are, the more you can engage in fasting. The more unhealthy you are and the lower your metabolism is, the more you shouldn't. I hope that kind of financial analogy resonated with y'all. What's your opinion on chewing cation to increase energy and alertness? I am not sure about that. Feel free and post something about it. If I don't know, I'm not going to BS you guys. I try to just tell you what I'm really confident with. I feel like I have some good lymph. I feel like I've got some lymph congestion around my throat, maybe thyroid, doing ginger. Anything else you recommend to help lymphatics? Yeah, you can do burdock root. Burdock root tea is great. There's also a old kind of tea. It's called Essiac tea. They use it in a lot of natural kind of cancer support programs. But Essiac is really good for lymph as well. Having conversion from T4 to T3, higher HDL, in LDL and glucose, low vitamin D, although I eat plenty of veggies and go outside. Okay, so that's more of a statement than a question, but I'll just kind of dive on to the T4, T3 issue. So yeah, the big nutrients, vitamin A, selenium, copper, magnesium, zinc, these are all important nutrients. We may add in Coleus forskill, we may add in some Google lipids, we may add in some ashwagandha and ginseng. These are things that can help T4, T3 conversion, maybe a tiny bit of iodine as long as there's no autoimmune antibodies. In my line, I have a product called Thyroid Replete. We'll put the link down below if you guys want to take a look at that product. If you want to purchase, you can. It helps support the show. With a total thyroidectomy due to papillary carcinoma, are there any supplements you would not take with your Levoxyl brand name levothyroxine tablet? Well, for the most part, you shouldn't take anything with it, meaning when you actually take it in the morning, you don't want to have any absorption issues because of extra minerals in there. So that's number one. Number two, I would probably move to a full spectrum glandular, like a WP or a Thyroid, so you're actually getting enough T3 there. And again, as long as there's no contraindication with your cancer, which there shouldn't be, but talk to your doctor about it, get a full spectrum glandular, especially if it's mostly gone, right? People think, because you have a thyroidectomy, meaning they cut out your thyroid, that you have no more thyroid hormone. But a thyroidectomy is kind of like pulling bubblegum off your shoes. Like you kind of get most of it, but there's some there, and then it can kind of grow back a little bit. So it's always a possibility. But I would look at a full spectrum thyroid glandular support. Oh, good. Glad you like the financial analogy. Thanks for the feedback. If anyone wants some BSing with someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, I'm happy to help. Got it. I love it. Cod is a plant that contains two stimulant chemicals, caffeine and cathinone, which are released upon chewing plants. So kind of like caffeine. I mean, I would want to look at it to make sure there's no toxicity issues, but if it's kind of like a natural caffeine kind of derivative, I think it's okay. I mean, I personally like my caffeine in my coffee. The key for good coffee is you want a kind of a good dry roast. You want to choose a brand that does not have a reputation of being moldy. Organic's really important. Coffee has a lot of pesticide residue, and I consume my coffee with fats and protein. So the fats like MCT and ghee butter really time release the caffeine. So if you are sensitive to caffeine, it's like no big deal. And then the collagen amino acids kind of make it a meal. And I just sip that, and that's really a great blood sugar stabilizer and really increases ketone production. Trying to figure out my condition, difficult body temp regulation, up and down, fatigue, foggy mind, and really bad forgetfulness, mood problems. So I always compartmentalize stuff. So when I see these issues, all right, got to look at the adrenals, got to look at hormones, got to look at gut, digestion, infections. If these issues are chronic, there may be some nutrient deficiencies. So I may want to run some deeper tests to look at nutrients, whether it's an ion panel or organic acid test, to look deeper at long-term deficiencies. And then I'd probably even throw in the thyroid there too, depending on how the first couple of tests came out. For a male with sinus respiratory issues, what kind of things could you find with the Dutch Complete testing? Thinking about ordering through your office. So with sinus and respiratory issues, I mean, I wouldn't jump on there. I wouldn't jump on the adrenals unless someone has been on steroids longer term, and it's a longer term issue, and maybe steroids help, because that tells me your natural adrenals and your natural steroids could be very depleted and could be stressed. So getting natural anti-inflammatory steroids through your own adrenals is helpful, but you'd want to fix the environment, right? Food, inflammation, right? You'd want to get your digestion better, and then really get your environment good with air filtration and or good sinus flushing. So air filtration, Austin Air's my fave, link below. Sinus flushing, justinhealth.com/shop. I have Amazon links for those products. Look for the Neti X Clear with the sinus syringe, and then get the air filters, get the sinus rinse, get the diet, and then you can then definitely look at the adrenals, especially if those kind of steroids have really helped in the past. Great questions though. Very good. Sounds like so many conditions: thyroid, Lyme, co-infections, candida, parasites. Yeah, I mean, like with myself, because I've seen thousands of patients, I don't get overwhelmed. I have a protocol that it's like if you're a pilot, right? And you go into a stall. Like there's a protocol you go to. Like I'm making this up. Like rudders, this, that. Like there's a protocol that you go to every single time when you have a stall. You do X, Y, Z. And if you do that and you can keep your wits about you, you're going to fix the stall, right? You're going to do it as long as you don't freak out. It's kind of like me in functional medicine. I'm like, all right, let's go look at the diet. Let's look at blood sugar. Let's look at digestion. Let's look at HCl. Let's look at bowel movements. Let's look at adrenals, female hormones, male hormones, thyroid. Well, let's go through the protocol. Let's see where it's at. Let's see which one's the weakest link, kind of trace some of that back to the root issue. And that's how I do it. So if you can have that mindset, that's helpful. And if you need more help with that, I'm always here available if you want to dive in deeper. All right, great questions, guys. I really appreciate it. A+ job today. Anything else, let me know. If not, I will be back tomorrow with another juicy topic. I'm excited. Just put up a new podcast recently on the mysterious causes of weight gain, so make sure you take a look at the podcast channel for that as well. Guys, have a phenomenal night. We'll be in touch. Links down below. Make sure you subscribe and thumbs up. Appreciate it, y'all. Bye now.